the Black Sea. Around it, great empires were born and died, and all of them actively traded with Asia through the Great Silk Road. In our era, some caravans, avoiding the desert of modern Iran, reached the Black Sea, where in the ports of Constantinople they loaded spices and silk onto ships. Constantinople stood at the only exit from the Black Sea to the Mediterranean Sea, the Bosporus and Dardanelles Straits, the natural border between Asia and Europe. And when the Western Roman Empire collapsed, dividing the political map of Europe into several states, it was Constantinople, as the capital of Byzantium, that became the main market in the world. Even Vikings and Slavs came here to trade. From the Baltic Sea, they traveled through all of Eastern Europe along the Dnieper River via the route from the Varangians to the Greeks. Later, well-known cities we know today, such as Novgorod, Smolensk and Kiev, will appear on this route, from which Kievan Rus' will later be formed. Growing stronger, in 907, it will go to war against Byzantium to achieve duty-free trade for its merchants, and as a sign of victory, Prince Oleg will nail his shield to the gates of Constantinople. But it was not only Ruses that attacked Byzantium. The ideal location of Constantinople provoked constant raids from its neighbors. In 1453, Constantinople finally fell under the onslaught of the Ottoman Empire. It will become its capital, but under a new name, Istanbul. This event will trigger the age of great geographical discoveries as Europeans begin to seek an alternative to the Great Silk Road. In the course of these explorations, Christopher Columbus will discover America for Europeans, and later Vasco da Gama will find a sea route to India. So, the Europeans will leave the Black Sea for a while, and Russes will deal with its internal problems. By the end of the 17th century, the Russian state would transform from a small Muscovite principality into the largest power in the territory of Eurasia, with one major problem. The only sea route from Russia to Europe was through Arkhangelsk. English and Dutch traders arrived at the northern port, buying Russian goods for next to nothing and selling them abroad with profits of up to 400%. Russian merchants had practically no ships of their own and had to sell furs, wax and timber to foreigners at low prices, which also harmed the Russian treasury. And even if these ships existed, the White Sea freezes in winter and becomes an insurmountable barrier for the wooden vessels of the 17th century. However, in the south, there are the Azov and Black Seas. But they are controlled by a vassal of the Ottoman Empire, the Crimean Khanate. Every summer, it raids the fertile lands of Russia, devastates them, and sells the Slavs into slavery in eastern markets. Peter I set out to solve these problems. During his reign, a commercial fleet was built in Arkhangelsk, which destroyed the monopoly of foreign merchants. But building a wooden military fleet in the north was pointless. It was necessary to move to the more southern Baltic or Black Seas, and in both cases, it would have required breaking through by force. Therefore, in 1686, Russia joined the Holy League, a European alliance that was fighting the Ottoman Empire to prevent it from advancing westward. The Ottomans were stretched across several fronts, allowing Russia to break through to the Sea of Azov and capture the fortress of the same name. But there will be little benefit from Azov, as the only exit to the Black Sea, the Kerch Strait, is still controlled by the Ottoman Empire. But for now, it's not about the Black Sea. In 1700, half of Europe began fighting for dominance over the Baltic Sea at Russia's northern borders. As a result of this northern war, Russia will gain access to the Baltic Sea, and Peter the First will establish a new capital of the country and become emperor. While this war is ongoing in the north, the Ottomans take revenge and in 1713 finally reclaim the territories of the Azov Sea and force Russia to get rid of its southern fleet. As a result, by the end of Peter the First's reign, Russia had acquired a naval fleet in the north and direct trade with Europe, but the problems of the aggressive Crimean Khanate in the south and the closed route to the Mediterranean Sea remained. And after the death of Peter the First, Russia plunged into palace coups for 40 years. Only when they ended did the empire devote serious efforts to the conquest of the Black Sea. Look at what was done to achieve this outcome. The Baltic fleet first circumnavigated all of Europe from the north, then entered the Black Sea through the Mediterranean Sea and caught the Turkish army by surprise. Under the cover of night, the Russian fleet approached Chesma Bay and defeated the opponent. The war continued for another 4 years, But in the end, the Ottoman Empire had no choice but to sign the unfavorable Treaty of Küçük-Kaynarca. Russia finally gained the right to trade in the Black Sea and navigate to the Mediterranean Sea through the Bosporus and Dardanelles Straits. Additionally, according to this treaty, the Crimean Khanate, a thorn in the southern borders of the empire, separated from the Ottoman Empire and was declared an independent territory. And it was from this moment that Crimea became a political arena for two empires, where each side tried to install its loyal leader. Prince Potemkin wrote the following notes to Catherine the Great on this matter. The Tatar nest, throughout the entire peninsula, has been the cause of war, unrest, and the devastation of our borders since ancient times. Turkey will trouble you through Crimea and weaken itself with the costs. Believe me, by acquiring Crimea, you will gain immortal glory, the likes of which no ruler in Russia has ever had. With Crimea will come dominance in the Black Sea. And while Potemkin dreams of Crimea, from which the entire Black Sea can be controlled, a civil war begins on the peninsula. The ruler, Khan Shahin Giray, began implementing pro-European democratic reforms in a country that had lived by traditions for centuries. The local nobility did not like the new order, and not without Potemkin's involvement, they forced the Khan to abdicate. Potemkin promises the Crimean elites to preserve all their privileges and guarantees of their safety if the peninsula becomes part of the Russian Empire. And in 1783, the residents of Crimea swore allegiance to Catherine II, and Prince Potemkin sent a letter to the Empress. Your Majesty, Crimea is at your feet. After acquiring Crimea, Russia began constructing a naval fleet. The settlement of Akhtiar was chosen as its base, and Catherine II gave it the name you know, Sevastopol. You might ask, what about the Ottoman Empire? Wasn't it opposed to such actions by Russia? And she had nothing to argue with, because at that moment, the Russian Empire was in a strong alliance with Austria, and Great Britain, which theoretically could have supported the Ottoman Empire, was suffering defeats from its colonies in North America, which were fighting for independence. However, the Ottoman Empire could not reconcile with the loss of Crimea and the strengthening of Russia in the Black Sea. Therefore, a few years later, another Russo-Turkish war began. Russian troops captured the fortresses of Ochakov and Izmail, and the invincible Fyodor Ushakov defeated the Turks at Cape Kaliakra. In fact, the news of the fall of the impregnable fortress of Ochakov so shocked the Ottoman Sultan Abdulhamid I that he suffered a stroke and died 4 months later. The peace treaty following that war pushed the borders even further, and the acquired stronghold allowed Russia to establish itself on the Dnieper estuary, which shielded Crimea from Turkish influence from the west. The main city through which Russia traded with Europe became Odessa. In fact, it was a free economic zone where there were no duties on foreign goods. The Ottoman Empire, once a powerful state, was turning into a transit point between Asia and Europe. The rapid increase in the import of cheap and high-quality European goods in the 19th century led to the decline of local production. During this time, Serbia, Wallachia, Moldavia, and Montenegro separated from the Ottoman Empire. And the main creditors of the empire became the industrially developed Great Britain and France. Well, because the Ottoman Empire had one very important purpose. It was not only a transit point in global trade, but also served as a living shield against Russia in the Mediterranean Sea and the Middle East. Moreover, Russia had recently defeated Napoleon and was successfully developing its southern territories while also maintaining good relations with Austria and Prussia. And of course, Russia had its eyes on the Bosporus and Dardanelles, as controlling them would allow for unhindered trade with Europe and the Middle East. And from there, it was just a short step to controlling the Mediterranean Sea. Around this time, British Lord Palmerston, the future Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, would state directly, "The best and most effective guarantee for the future peace of Europe would be the separation from Russia of some border territories acquired by it in more recent times: Georgia, Circassia, Crimea, Bessarabia, Poland, and Finland." Britain was also alarmed by the fact that from 1832 to 1840, the volume of Russian grain exports grew by 56% each year, and Europe was becoming heavily dependent on these supplies. The spark for this powder keg was the transfer of the Church of the Nativity in Bethlehem, Jerusalem, to the Catholic Church by the Turkish sultans. Russia demanded that this church be given to the Orthodox Church, but was refused. Then Nicholas I decided to pressure the Ottoman Empire and deployed troops to Moldavia and Wallachia, autonomous regions on the border of the Ottoman state, which were under the protectorate of the Russian Empire. Encouraged by France and Great Britain, the Ottoman Empire declared war on Russia at the end of 1853. In the first year of this war, Turkey suffered defeat after defeat, and a large part of its fleet was destroyed in the harbor of Sinop by Vice Admiral Nakhimov. Therefore, immediately after the Battle of Sinop, France, Great Britain, and even Sardinia entered the war. The leader of the House of Commons and head of the Liberal Party of Britain, John Russell, stated that the bear's fangs must be pulled out. Until its fleet and naval arsenal in the Black Sea are destroyed, Constantinople will not be safe, and there will be no peace in Europe. The Battle of Sinop was one of the last battles of the sailing fleet, and when Britain and France entered the war with steamships, it became clear that agrarian Russia was significantly behind industrial Europe in technology. The main city of the Black Sea, Sevastopol, was defended for 349 days. Here, the young writer Leo Tolstoy will write his war reports, which will be published under the title Sevastopol Sketches. Ultimately, the city will fall, and another famous writer, Mark Twain, will visit it 10 years after the end of this war and write that Pompeii was preserved much better than Sevastopol. Blocked during the war, the Bosporus prevented Russia from selling its main export commodity in its primary foreign market. And due to the Crimean War, grain exports through the Black Sea and Azov seaports decreased by 98%, and Russia's budget deficit exceeded the annual treasury income by 3 times. It was necessary to conclude an unfavorable peace treaty. In 1856, it was decided in Paris that Russia and Turkey were henceforth prohibited from maintaining a Black Sea naval fleet and coastal fortifications in the Black Sea area. Overall, the treaty put Russia in a very dangerous position, where it had no ability to defend its borders from enemy invasion, while Turkey, Britain, and France had naval fleets in the neighboring Mediterranean Sea. Russia managed to regain its rights in the Black Sea through diplomatic means only after 15 years. When Prussia, allied with the Russian Empire, defeated France in another war, Russia presented Europe with a fait accompli. Our august sovereign considers it his right and duty to declare the termination of the convention that determines the number and size of warships in the Black Sea. As British newspapers wrote in the autumn of 1870, Russia's statement had the impact of a bombshell and disrupted the emerging unity of Europe. Given the international situation, the leading Western powers of that time were forced to swallow this political démarche and agree to these demands. And already in 1871, a new agreement was signed in London, allowing the fleets of Russia and Turkey to return to the Black Sea. However, the ban on the passage of Russian warships through the Bosporus and Dardanelles Straits remained in place, so that the Black Sea fleet could not enter the Mediterranean Sea. Russia had a chance to challenge this position during World War I, but on the initiative of Winston Churchill on February 19, 1915, Britain was the first to launch the Dardanelles operation against the Ottoman Empire to seize control of the strait for itself. In response, Nicholas II ordered preparations for an operation to capture the Bosporus, but this battle was not destined to happen. The Dardanelles operation initially failed, and Russia would soon exit World War I. Due to economic problems, a power crisis, and failures on the European front, a revolution and civil war will begin in the country. After the 1917 revolution and the start of the Civil War, Crimea became one of the centers of the White movement. The peninsula was an ideal place for defense, as the only land route to it is the narrow Perekop Isthmus, which can be effectively defended by a small number of people. But in the end, it was from the shores of Crimea, under the leadership of General Wrangel, that more than 150,000 officers, intelligentsia, and former elites left Russia forever. The Crimean Autonomous Republic will become part of the Soviet Union on October 18, 1921. Novorossiysk and Tuapse will become oil bases, from where oil will be transported by tankers to Europe. And the main export product of Odessa and Kherson will, of course, be grain. Sevastopol will be one of the main naval bases of the Soviet Union, where the fleet will begin to be rebuilt. And while the Soviet Union will be engaged in building socialism and restoring the economy, the countries of Europe will be dealing with the defeated Germany and the Ottoman Empire from World War I. The latter was divided. Part of the territory went to the victors, and the center of the former empire became the Turkish Republic. According to the Treaty of Lausanne, the Bosporus and Dardanelles became public, allowing anyone to pass through them regardless of the type of vessel. That is, the Black Sea became an open passage for everyone, and practically any country could bring its fleet into it. The Soviet Union, of course, did not recognize this treaty and spent the next 13 years looking for an opportunity to revise it. And when by the 1930s, the threat of a new world war arises in Europe, none of the European states will oppose prohibiting the entry of warships and submarines from countries that do not have access to the Black Sea. This status of the Black Sea was established in 1936 in the city of Montreux in western Switzerland. From the Bosporus and Dardanelles, any commercial ships could pass, but access to foreign military fleets was closed. In general terms, these provisions of the Montreux Convention still regulate the passage of any ships through the Bosporus and Dardanelles. But despite the requirements of this convention, on June 22, 1941, at 3:07 a.m., the commander of the Black Sea Fleet, Vice Admiral Oktyabrski, reported to the Chief of the General Staff, General Zhukov. The fleet's air surveillance, warning, and communication system reports the approach of a large number of unidentified aircraft from the sea. The fleet is in full combat readiness. At 3:17, German aviation is bombing Sevastopol. They did not approach the main base of the Black Sea from the water. Turkey controls the straits according to the Montreux Convention. The Soviet Union was attacked from the air. The Great Patriotic War began, and Sevastopol became one of its first victims. Despite the fact that the concentration of enemy artillery during the assault on Sevastopol was the highest of the entire war, the city could not be taken for 8 months. The heroic defense of Sevastopol tied down Germany and Crimea and helped the Soviet army gain time. Exactly 1 year before the victory over Germany, Sevastopol will be completely liberated, and on the eve of the Third Reich's capitulation, the Yalta Conference will be held in Crimea, where Stalin, Churchill, and Roosevelt will discuss the post-war order of the world. When World War II ends, an ideological war will begin between the West and the Soviet Union. On March 12, 1947, President of the United States Harry Truman addressed Congress with a special message about providing Greece and Turkey with assistance amounting to $400 million. In his message, Truman stated, "We must frankly recognize that the free countries of the world are threatened by direct or indirect aggression from totalitarianism, and this threatens peace worldwide and hinders America's security." Turkey will receive this money from the United States, and later, in 1952, still fearing the ambitions of the Soviet Union, the former Ottoman Empire will join a new alliance. With the rising tensions of the Cold War, Crimea will become an important defensive point on the borders of the Soviet Union. They will even build a secret underground submarine base there, in case of a nuclear war with the United States. At the same time, Crimea was geographically very closely connected with the Ukrainian SSR. Crimea suffered greatly during the Great Patriotic War, and the main flow of people and raw materials to the peninsula came from the territory of the adjacent Ukrainian SSR. Therefore, on April 26, 1954, by decree of the Presidium of the Supreme Soviet of the Soviet Union, Crimea was transferred to the jurisdiction of the Ukrainian Republic due to the commonality of the economy, territorial proximity, and close economic and cultural ties between the Crimean region and the Ukrainian Soviet Republic.
из состава Российской Советской Федеративной Социалистической Республики в состав Украинской Советской Социалистической Республики.
When the Soviet Union collapsed, in 1991, new countries appeared around the Black Sea: Georgia, Russia, Ukraine. At this time, a referendum on the sovereignty of the peninsula is taking place in Crimea, and in 1993, the regional authorities even introduced the position of President of Crimea. In 1995, the Verkhovna Rada of Ukraine unilaterally abolished this position, and Crimea became an autonomous republic within other entities of Ukraine. But a real diplomatic struggle began over the Black Sea Fleet. After long negotiations, this decision was made. Russia retained 338 ships and vessels, while Ukraine received 32. To make the deal equitable, Ukraine was compensated with more than $500 million for the division of the Black Sea Fleet. One question remained: where to station this fleet? Ideally, in Crimea. Therefore, in 1997, as part of the Big Treaty of Friendship and Cooperation, Russia received the use of military bases in Sevastopol, Feodosia, Yalta, and Sudak, for which it paid Ukraine $98 million annually in rent. In 2010, this agreement was extended until 2042, and in return, Russia gave Ukraine a 30% discount on gas. And if you still don't understand why such expenses are necessary, look at the location of the largest military bases in the Black Sea: Novorossiysk, Sevastopol, Constanța, Varna, Samsun, Artvin, Okamchire. Without Sevastopol, the only point where the Russian military fleet can be based in the Black Sea is the city of Novorossiysk. And you will say again, so what? After all, Ukraine, Romania, Bulgaria, and Georgia will also have one military base each in the Black Sea. But here, one important factor must be taken into account. After the collapse of the Soviet Union, events unfolded in a surprising way. The military bloc NATO, which was created by the United States to counter the Soviet Union, is actively growing with new members. And in 2004, Romania and Bulgaria joined it, which, according to the Montreux Convention, can maintain their military fleet there. And after this event, it turns out that NATO has 4 military bases in the Black Sea, while Russia has 1. But that's not all. On April 3, 2008, another NATO summit was held in Bucharest, where the membership of the 2 remaining Black Sea countries in the alliance was discussed. And here's another connection for you. A couple of months later, during the Summer Olympics in Beijing, South Ossetia and Abkhazia, regions of Georgia, declare themselves independent republics. Georgia, of course, is trying to retain these regions, while Russia, on the contrary, supports their independence. During this conflict, Georgia loses most of its Black Sea coast. And that very military base in Abkhazia, the port of Okamchire, now has no chance of falling under NATO influence. And after these events, Georgia left the CIS, but it has not been accepted into NATO yet. And if these events had not occurred, it would be the endgame for Russia. All those wars for the Black Sea a couple of centuries ago fought by the Russian Empire would have been in vain. In 2019, more than half of all merchant ships in the Black Sea belonged to Russia, and in 2023, 290 million tons of cargo passed through the ports on the Black Sea and the Sea of Azov. This accounts for a third of all maritime trade of Russia. And imagine that you do not have a strong fleet in such an enclosed sea with a vast expanse. To the opponents, will he let you trade freely? Who needs such a competitor? If we assume that Russia is losing influence in the Black Sea, then what does it have left? It is thrown back 300 years to the times of Peter the Great. Yes, in the north, the country has the main ports of the Northern Sea route, Murmansk and Arkhangelsk, but they have completely different tasks. Murmansk and Arkhangelsk provide access to the Arctic Ocean and Arctic territories. Through these ports, minerals, timber and fish are exported, but Russia is also the world's leading grain supplier. Even to poor countries that have significant problems with fighting hunger, Russia exports the most wheat, rye and barley. And almost all the grain from Russia goes through the Black Sea. And this is not surprising. Look at where the 5 main grain-producing regions of Russia are located. All these regions are located near the Black Sea basin, and transporting goods across half the country to other ports is simply time-consuming and expensive. And this concerns not only Murmansk and Arkhangelsk, but also the far east and the northwest of the country. They serve their regions and their trading partners. Moreover, St. Petersburg and Kaliningrad are potential hostages of their geography. They have access to the European market through the Baltic Sea, but the exit from it goes through the narrow Danish Straits, which can be navigated by NATO warships. Here, I will remind you once again about the uniqueness of the Black Sea. To enter the Black Sea from the Mediterranean, one must pass exclusively through the Bosporus and the Dardanelles, which are located in Turkey, a NATO member. But this passage is regulated by the Montreux Convention, and only warships from countries that have direct access to the Black Sea can pass through it. So, the loss of the Black Sea region for the Russian economy is a devastating blow, which it is trying to prevent by any means. But this also works in the opposite direction. If NATO loses influence in the Black Sea region, it deals a significant blow to security in the eastern part of the alliance. Russia will have an advantage in the naval fleet, which can approach any coast of the Black Sea at any moment. Therefore, it is not by chance that the largest NATO military base in Europe is being built in Romania today. Furthermore, with the loss of the Black Sea, NATO and the United States in particular lose access to Central Asia through the Caucasus. where they currently do not have much influence, but are very eager to gain a foothold. This region is one of the few on the planet where the United States does not have a large number of military bases and where pro-Russian or neutral sentiments are strong, and Turkey plays on both sides. It seems to be an eternal rival of Russia, a long-standing NATO member, and a candidate for European Union membership, yet it does not forget to buy gas from Russia through the Blue Stream and Turkish Stream pipelines. For Turkey, Russia is the main supplier of oil and gas, thanks to which Turkey earns huge amounts of money from the transit of energy resources to Europe, while most of Gazprom's pipelines are shut down due to sanctions. And finally, the last thing that is also very frightening for the United States is China's influence in the Black Sea region. A part of the new Silk Road stretches from China to the Black Sea, via the Trans-Caspian corridor. And although it currently lags behind the Suez Canal in terms of cargo volume by approximately 600 times, it is most importantly twice as short. And China is very actively investing in infrastructure in Kazakhstan and Turkey, thereby influencing these countries no less, and perhaps even more, than the United States. And Turkey, like the countries before it that were on this territory, is still the connecting link between the West and the East. And this role is only growing with the rise of China's power. Turkey wants to become indispensable both for China on one hand and for Europe and NATO on the other. Therefore, neither the United States nor NATO hide the importance of the Black Sea to them. In 2022, the United States Congress published a Security Act, stating that the United States must continue to work within NATO and its allies on a long-term strategy to strengthen the security of the Black Sea region countries. That is why right now, two major forces are clashing in the Black Sea, and a third one is already on the way. And even if one of them gains a decisive advantage, it is not the end, because the battle for the Black Sea is an eternal story.